Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I just wanted to say that I'm going to be passing it on to James, and I'm really excited about the topic he's covering tonight. And I'll be in the chat so that I can answer any questions as we go, but we'll also have a Q&A in the end. Hello, I'm already getting hello. Hello. We're all very excited for this, and I'm very excited to present James to you. James Lamb, he's one of our therapists that I'm very proud to have with us. And James, I'm going to give it up to you.
Thanks, Ali. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Life Clinic's free 8-week webinar series. Our passion is providing accessible, cutting-edge, evidence-based mental health treatment. Our services, including psychological therapy, coaching, and assessments, aim to guide clients toward their best lives in a non-judgmental environment with specialized professionals. We provide at-home visits, offer multiple office locations throughout Ontario and Alberta, and provide worldwide online and telehealth sessions. The Life Clinic team is here for you. Thank you for joining us tonight. I've been with the Life Clinic for about a year, so I have to say that I have been very fortunate to be working with such a great team. I feel very supported and accommodated. And I'm also very happy that I have been given the opportunity to share with you tonight on the topic of relationships. This pandemic is presenting an unprecedented reality, and adapting to this new normal can be extremely difficult for all of us. The Life Clinic is excited to offer this webinar series titled Life During COVID-19, How to Be the Best Version of Yourself During and After the Pandemic. The goal of this series is to provide free, easily accessible information from experts on topics relevant to our lives in this unprecedented time of the pandemic. 6 mental health professionals will provide a series of workshops aiming to help us navigate our new normal and the physical and mental health challenges it has created or exacerbated. Last week, my colleague presented on coping with parenting in a pandemic, and a recording of her webinar will be made available along with her PowerPoint presentation and handouts. Just to let you know about our upcoming webinars, it will be about mood and pain management, relationships, meditation for stress, support for caregivers of people with autism spectrum disorder, and anxiety reduction techniques. So just to tell you a little bit about myself, I am a registered psychotherapist and a registered marriage and family therapist. I also practice emotionally focused therapy, also known as EFT, with couples. And throughout my learning with couples on this treatment, I've learned a lot about attachment and how people struggle with their attachment fears and longings. So that's why I'm so excited to share with you tonight what I've learned throughout the years. In addition, just a little bit about myself. I've been married for 35 years. I have 2 daughters who are married, and I have 2 grandsons. So as you can see, relationships are very important to me. So knowing that I can help people understand relationships from the perspective of attachment would be something that I am excited to share about tonight. After the presentation, there will be a brief question and answer section, so please feel free to ask questions in a private chat during the presentation. We will gather the questions and then we will answer them anonymously during that time. If you would like to book a free consultation with a clinic director or a session with myself, please let us know in the chat and we will arrange to contact you after the webinar. So I'm going to start my presentation. I'm going to share my slides in a minute. So before I begin talking about attachment and relationships, perhaps it is a time for all of us to reflect on your relationship at this time. What was your relationship like before COVID-19? And during COVID-19, Has anything changed in your relationship? And if so, what's different? And how do you manage the change? I've heard throughout this time that despite the fact that it is a crisis, we've seen people come together and help out one another. People go above and beyond in order to help one another and their communities. So although this is a crisis that we're facing, it also presents to us a lot of opportunity for us to do something different that would help us get over this crisis. During this time, I've heard many people share with me that they spend quality time with their families, including the children who are at home. So that's great to see that is a positive thing. And perhaps maybe you can spend more time with your partner. Perhaps maybe he or she is working from home and you have more time to talk, whereas before you may not even have this opportunity. Or perhaps maybe this presents an additional challenge in your relationship. Perhaps it has taken a toll on your relationship because of this pandemic. So whatever your situation may be, I'd just like you to spend some time to reflect on that. And if you want to share your thoughts with us, feel free to send your comments in the chat box. So today's topic is about strengthening and maintaining relationships through the attachment lens. So here are the learning objectives. To understand love and attachment, to try to explore triggers and patterns for emotional disconnection, to identify the cycle of negative interaction, or what we call demon dialogues, and lastly, to shape a positive loving bond that would sustain our relationship for the long haul. Although the presentation tonight is focused primarily on couples, the principles that I'll be talking about apply to other relationships as well. So, attachment theory. Before I go about talking about attachment theory, let's talk about what is attachment. What is the definition of attachment? So here's a definition from John Bowlby, who is a British psychiatrist who first proposed this attachment theory back in the 50s, 60s. So attachment is a deep and enduring emotional bond that connects one person to another across time and space. So in a nutshell, attachment is an emotional bond. And attachment theories explains how the parent-child relationship emerges and influences subsequent development. So the attachment theory in a nutshell, it's about our basic instinct as human beings. We seek contact and comforting connection. It has been shown that it is not aggression, not sex that we're after. It is about our human emotional connection with people. So here are two quotes from John Bowlby. All of us from cradle to grave are happiest when life is organized as a series of excursions, long or short, from the secure base provided by our attachment figures. Life is best organized as a series of daring ventures from a secure base. So those two statements are very similar. And basically, I just want to highlight two important phrases from those statements. First is attachment figure. What is an attachment figure or figures? It is the one person or a few significant others in your life that you're close to, that you felt that you have a connection with. Somebody that you can go to for comfort, for support, for soothing when there's a need. Whether you're having a bad time or whether you're going through a difficult time, whatever that you're going through, is there somebody that you can go to who can comfort you and who can soothe you? So those people we call attachment figures. Do you have anyone like that in your life? Normally, it would be maybe your parent or your spouse, your partner, a friend, a sibling, etc. So I want you to think about who is your attachment figure. And then the second key phrase from these two statements is secure base. So secure base is basically we all need a safe haven, a safe environment where we can feel comfortable and safe in order to live our life as a human being. So the attachment theory that we're talking about here does not apply just to children. As John Bowlby said, it's from cradle to grave. We don't outgrow that need for attachment even as an adult. So here's a new look at relationships through the attachment lens. As I mentioned before, the first and foremost instinct of humans is to seek contact and comforting connection. So it's the emotional bond that we're talking about. We need to have a safe haven, a secure base. So this bonding is wired in. Adult love is an attachment bond, just like the one between mother and child. An emotional connection is coded as a safety cue in our brains. Isolation and emotional separation from our attachment figures are danger cues. We sense that as danger when we feel isolated and detached from our loved ones. Everyone needs a secure bond with another. So this applies to everybody, regardless of race, gender, or culture. To be connected is to be stronger, to be more resilient, not to be immature or weak or too needy. In our culture, we believe that as we get older, we need to be independent. We don't need to depend on others. So that's why we see a lot of people become so self-sufficient, so self-dependent that they cut off their close relationships. So the connection is there for life. The truth is, when we're connected with our attachment figure, it makes us stronger, makes us more resilient, instead of being weak or immature. The quality of our emotional bond changes how we see ourselves, how we engage with others, and how we deal with the stress of life. They impact whether we see ourselves as lovable, competent, and deserving of care, and whether we see others as trustworthy and dependable. So the quality of our emotional connection affects the view of ourselves as well as the view of others. When we are connected, we can explore and learn better when someone has our back. A secure sense of being loved is actually very empowering. In a secure bond, we are accessible, responsive, and engaged. So this is what we call the ARE question. So this is something that I'll be talking about at the end. How do we have an ARE conversation with our loved ones in order to nurture this secure bond? Research has shown that the security of our connection, of our emotional connection with others, impacts our physical health, such as our immune system, such as the health of our heart. It also impacts our mental health, such as how vulnerable we are to develop depression or anxiety. So you can see emotional connection is so important in our lives that it affects our physical health and our mental health. Now we're beginning to understand the chemistry of love. When we are close to our loved ones, it actually turns on a cuddle hormone, oxytocin, that triggers contentment, happiness, and turns off the stress hormone like cortisol. So something is happening in our body in terms of our hormonal level when we have emotional connection. Isn't that great? On the flip side, when we cannot connect with another person and we feel alone, deserted, or rejected, a primal panic is turned on in our brains. So what happens is when we feel disconnected, it is something actually very traumatic, very painful. What we normally do in that situation when we're in a panic mode is either fight, flight, or flee, or freeze. So this is something that is hardwired in our brains. So when we don't feel safe, we get into a panic mode and we try our best to reconnect as much as possible. But unfortunately, sometimes we don't have the tools to do it properly, and we end up perpetuating our relationship in a negative way. So emotional disconnection is actually at the heart of relationship distress. This has been shown in research and has been demonstrated in many, many studies. It is not about the actual content of the conflict or the argument, but at the heart of relationship distress, it's about emotional disconnection. So what happens when we are disconnected emotionally? We will get stuck in an unhealthy coping style, and we move into what is called the demon dialogues. So the demon dialogue is a term coined by Sue Johnson in her book, Hold Me Tight, which I'm going to share about in a minute. In fact, a lot of my content is taken from her book, Hold Me Tight. A lot of what I'm talking about are the first few conversations in her book. So when we get stuck in a demon dialogue, or what we call a negative vicious cycle, we behave in a way that triggers one another, and instead of resolving the conflict, we end up making it worse. So as I mentioned, disconnection in any love relationships hurts. It is painful. It is stressful. And if it continues for a long time in anyone's relationship, it is actually very crippling and traumatic. As I've seen in my couples who come to see us for counseling, they have been stuck in this negative cycle for many, many years, and they haven't been able to get out of it. So when they're so stuck in their cycle, they don't know what to do. They cannot find a way out. They feel helpless and hopeless. So, as I mentioned earlier, key conflicts are all about emotional disconnection. Usually people get stuck arguing or talking about the content of their conflicts or arguments. But really underneath all that is the key question related to attachment. Are you there for me? That is, do I matter to you? Can I reach you? Will you respond when I call? So this is what we call the ARE question. Are you accessible, responsive, and engaged? The problem is that this key question is usually buried, hidden, just underneath the surface in most arguments. People don't see that. In my experience working with couples, when they talk about their fight, when they talk about how they are upset about each other, they only talk about the problem, but they do not understand underneath all of that, there are huge attachment issues that cause these conflicts and disconnection that they're not aware of. So our job is to help them see the underlying attachment fears and needs that they're not able to access. And when they're able to access that and recognize that and be able to share with their partner, then things start to change. So that's why attachment is such an important discovery in loving relationships. When you understand that, then you begin to have a map on how to get out of the cycle. So are you there? So it stands for accessible, responsive, and engaged, or being present. So here's a handout that I have attached, so you can download that to do a little self-assessment to see how accessible, responsive, and engaged you are in your relationship. So you can do one for yourself, and you can also do one for your partner, and vice versa. So again, this is a handout for you to look at after the webinar. So we can see the attachment perspectives. The attachment perspective offers a map for loving, stable relationships. So it's like a GPS. It tells us how to go back to our secure base when we go off track, when we get stuck. It offers a model for a secure bond where we can integrate all aspects of our relationship from any attachment issues, any attachment needs to caretaking and even sexuality. So now, from both John Bowlby's research and from the research that has been going on for the last 20 or 25 years, we believe that we have uncracked the code of love. So love is no longer a mystery. It's not illogical or random. Love is logical, understandable, and predictable. So now we can shape it in a way that we want to go in order to nurture a secure relationship. So I talked a lot about attachment so far, and it has two sides. It is two sides of the same coin. We have attachment needs and attachment fears. And what are some basic attachment needs that are common to all human beings? We need to feel safe and secure. We need to feel loved, be accepted, to be heard and understood, to be respected and acknowledged, to feel belonged, to feel that I matter. So those are some of the ARE questions that I posed earlier. So all these, and there could be more. I've just listed some of the key ones. So what are some of your attachment needs that you think are important to you? It could be on the list. Maybe you have more that you want to add. On the flip side, we all have common attachment fears. What are they? Being rejected, being abandoned, not measuring up, being a failure, not being accepted or valued, being unlovable, and being controlled. Again, you can add your own fear on this list. So I'd like you to take a moment to think about what is your attachment need? What are your attachment needs and what are your attachment fears? And how are they related to your current relationships? How do they get triggered? And when it gets triggered, what happens? So I'm going to talk a little bit about attachment style. And the reason why I want to talk about style is that because we are all different. We all have different temperament, personalities. And the attachment style is established in early childhood attachments and continues to function as a working model for relationship in adulthood. And the reason why it is important to look at our attachment style is because recognizing our attachment style can help us understand our strengths and vulnerabilities in a relationship. So in this chart, you can see there's, on the top hand side, there's two different levels of anxiety, low or high. On the left hand column, there is the avoidance level, low or high. So somebody who has low avoidance and low anxiety would have a secure style of attachment. People who have high anxiety but low avoidance would have what we call preoccupied attachment style. People with low anxiety and high avoidance would have what's called dismissing style of attachment. And people with high anxiety and high avoidance would have what we call fearful avoidant attachment style. So let me just quickly highlight, the differences between the four types. So securely attached adults tend to be more satisfied in their relationship. Secure adults offer support when their partner feels distressed. They also go to their partner for comfort when they themselves feel troubled. Their relationship tends to be honest, open, and equal, with both people feeling independent yet loving toward each other. So this is what we want to have, a secure style of attachment. People with preoccupied attachment style tend to be desperate to form a fantasy bond. Instead of feeling real love or trust toward their partner, they often feel emotional hunger. They're frequently looking to their partner to rescue them or to complete them. Although they're seeking a sense of safety and security by clinging to their partner, they take actions that push their partner away. People with a dismissing attachment style have the tendency to emotionally distance themselves from their partner. They tend to lead a more inward lives, both denying the importance of loved ones and detaching easily from them. They often have the ability to shut down emotionally. People with fearful avoidant attachment style live in an ambivalent state in which they are afraid of being too close to or too distant from others. They often have fears of being abandoned, but also struggle to be intimate. So in general, those are the 4 styles of attachment. And if you're interested to find out your attachment style, I've attached a handout where you can do a quick assessment of what style you are. Next, I'm going to talk about emotions. And there are 2 types, primary and secondary. We are emotional beings, right? We experience emotions all the time. A lot of times we are aware of what we are experiencing, what we are feeling, but sometimes we may not be aware of what we're feeling. And sometimes it is hard to access those emotions. An emotion in the context of what we're talking about here in terms of attachment and relationship is that the emotion is the music of the dance between people. So the dance we're talking about here is the interaction, the cycle between 2 individuals. And when we get stuck in a demon dialogue, we're in a tango, we're in a dance. So depending on how the dance goes, the background of the dance is the music, and the emotion is the music of the dance. So you have to tune into the music in order to find out how your dance goes. So this is something very important to understand emotions. So primary emotions are mostly biologically adaptive emotions. Secondary emotions are reactions to the primary emotions. So basically, psychologists have classified, basically there are 6 types of basic emotions: happiness, sadness, fear, disgust, anger, and surprise. Secondary emotions or reactive emotions are in response to other emotions or thoughts. So I've listed some of them. There are more. And the ones in red are so-called negative kind of secondary emotions. And the one in yellow are what's considered to be more positive secondary emotions. And when we experience emotions, especially secondary emotion, it is fast. It happens in nanoseconds. Emotions serve a function to tell us what is happening in us. For example, when our safety is threatened, we experience fear, emotion of fear. Also, how do we know about our emotions? We can pay attention to our physical bodies. Our physical bodies experience different sensations in response to different emotions, such as rapid heartbeat, sweating, shakiness, etc. I mentioned earlier that most people are not aware of the primary emotion. They usually are aware of the secondary emotions, but a lot of times they're not aware of the primary emotions, which are the more vulnerable, soft emotions. During moments of emotional disconnection, we usually exhibit the secondary emotions, especially anger. And in order for us to pay attention to access the primary emotions. We need to step out. We need to go down the elevator. We need to go down to the elevator in order to access them. We need to pay attention to what's happening in us. Okay, so how love goes wrong? How does love go wrong? We know that we're not always in agreement. Conflicts are bound to happen. We end up we end up entering into an argument, etc. So how does love go wrong? So according to the research that has been done on this topic, we get stuck in what's called the demon dialogues when we don't understand the nature of love, when we don't understand our own needs, we don't understand how our action impacts on our partner. And oftentimes we send confusing or distorted signals, which makes the communication even worse. Instead of saying one thing, somehow our nonverbal communication communicates something totally different, which is not what we intended. And hence we end up in a conflict, and we usually get stuck in these demon dialogues. Moments of disconnection are inevitable. We all have that. When that happens, softer signals get lost. However, more secure couples can reattune. They can see the dance, they can see what's happening, and they can come out of that and they can reconnect and repair the rift. Okay. So the demon dialogues are what we call negative spirals. It keeps us spiraling down. So it goes something like this. The more you do this, the more I do that. The more you criticize, the more I avoid. And the more I avoid, the more you chase, the more you poke, the more you demand, and the more I shut down. So this spins us around. So flight and flee takes over. Demon dialogues are the enemy of secure connection. So this is something really important to understand, is that when people get caught in a demon dialogue, which they sometimes don't recognize, they see their partner as the enemy. So what we try to do is we help partners see the actual cycle that is going on that keeps them stuck. So it is important to point out that the demon dialogue, the vicious cycle that they're in, that they're caught in, they are the enemy of their connection, not each other. So what they need to do is they need to stand together against the demon dialogue. They need to help others see the demon dialogue and slow them down. So a lot of times we help couples to slow it down, to process what's happening, and then they see, oh, when I do this, she does this. And when she does this, I do this. So once they recognize that it is this pattern that has been going on that keeps them stuck, then they begin to see that there's hope. They begin to see that they can come out of that and they can learn how to stop that. So if there's emotional disconnection, we tend to have habitual coping strategies, which is often learned in early relationships, such as angry blaming. So sometimes we learn that from our parents, sometimes we learn that from other relationships. And subconsciously we pick that up without realizing it. So again, this is something that we unfortunately pick that up in our early relationships that we're not aware of. So in general, Sue Johnson talked about 3 kinds of demon dialogues, 3 kinds of dances, or 3 vicious cycles that people get stuck in. So the first one, she called it defining the bad guy, where both parties accuse and blame. So it's attack, attack. The second demon dialogue is called the protest poker, where usually you have a person who pursues, and then you have the other partner withdraws. So the pursuer will criticize, control, complain, and then the withdrawer will avoid defend, and stonewall. The third demon dialogue is what we call freeze and flee. Both parties mutually withdraw. There's a sense of helplessness and hopelessness. We can all do 3 of these demon dialogues, but usually one is front and center. And the second one, the protest poker, is by far the most common that we see in counseling. So here's the first one, finding the bad guy, where both parties are fighting. You probably have seen this kind of demon dialogue on movies, where one person attacks, the other person attacks back. So what does it look like? In this dialogue, the parties define the other person or the relationship as absolute. They may say things like, you always do this, you never do this. The main emotion seems to be anger. They're both being trapped. They're going to a dead end. There's no winners. There's no win-win. They both lose. And partners get sucked down on the content of the argument. So the spiral looks something like this. The more you attack, the more dangerous you appear, the more I watch my back. The harder I hit back, the more you attack. So it's attack going on. The second demon dialogue is the protest poker, which is by far the most common that we see in practice. Both parties are protesting disconnection. However, they're not aware of their attachment needs. It's, again, as I mentioned, it's hidden, it's buried underneath the argument, whatever that may be. They're sending ambiguous messages to each other. Instead of letting the other person know how much they're hurt, what happens to them during this fight, they react with secondary emotion and they send a message that is very ambiguous to the other party. So no wonder the other person gets very confused and don't know what's happening. So I mentioned there's usually two groups of people. One group is called the pursuers, the other one is called the withdrawals. And the spiral goes something like this. The more disconnected or dismissed I feel, the more I complain, demand, get critical, and pursue you. So this is the pursuer talking. And the more dangerous I appear, the more you move away, defend, shut down, and shut me out. So the withdrawal senses that the pursuer is dangerous. It's dangerous because our brain sends a signal, danger, danger. And what happens to the withdrawal? He or she will move away, defend, shut down, and shut the other person out. So here are some things that pursuers may say. I'm dying here. I'm shut out. My feelings don't matter. I'm all by myself. I'm dismissed. I yell and I poke to get a response, any response. So they work really hard to really get the other person to respond. But the way that they do that end up pushing the other person away and they get more and more disconnected. Withdrawals would say something like this. I never get it right. I can't please you. I give up, spaced out. It is best to avoid a fight. I try to keep things calm. There's no point fighting. I go behind my wall. I hide. I try to fix it, but it doesn't work. I numb out. So these are some of the things that we hear over and over again from people when they talk about their relationships. So when they say things like this, then we can identify the pattern that they're stuck in. So the third demon dialogue, it's freeze and flee. There's mutual withdrawal, frozen defense, and denial. Nobody's on the dance floor. The dance was grinding to a halt. At least the first two, they're still on the dance floor, but doing disruptive things. But in this case, they're too tired to dance. It is often the aftermath of a chronic protest poker going on. So when people are in a poker protest over and over and over again, they get exhausted. They don't have the energy to fight anymore. They go to freeze and flee. There's a sense of hopelessness, helplessness. They are strangers to each other. There's an icy emptiness that is very depressing, which is a prelude to detachment, which is also something that people experience before they separate or divorce. The spiral goes like this. The more I hold back and shut down my feelings, the more careful and distant you become. The more distant you are, the more I go into my shell and chill out. So both persons are protecting themselves. They are too tired, too exhausted to even fight and protest anymore. So this is a sad reality that we're seeing, when people get stuck in these three types of demon dialogues. So I'm going to show you this diagram to illustrate the process a little bit better. So this is what's called an infinity loop. So it goes like this. Okay. So on the left-hand side is the pursuer, the right-hand side is the withdrawer. And above the dotted line, you see behaviors for the pursuer as well as behaviors for the withdrawer. You see secondary emotions for the pursuer and secondary emotions for the withdrawer. Underneath the dotted line, there are primary emotions, the softer, more vulnerable emotions that we usually are not aware of, are not being accessed. So there are primary emotions for the pursuer as well as primary emotions for the withdrawer. So just let me give you an example of how this infinity cycle works. Okay. So assuming the pursuer is the wife, for instance, and the withdrawer is the husband. So it goes something like that. When the wife gets critical, it triggers the husband's attachment fear of, let's say, inadequacy. And the husband felt rejected, which is his primary emotion. Unfortunately, the husband is not aware of that and not being able to share, not even able to tune in and share with his wife. Instead, he reacts with a secondary emotion of anxiety. And he became silent. He didn't say anything. The husband's silence triggers the wife's attachment fear of being alone. And she experienced the primary emotion of sadness. However, she reacts with anger. She tries harder to get a response by being more aggressive. But the husband's fears get further triggered, and he felt totally overwhelmed. And as a result, he reacts with further distance and shut down. So you can see our behavior, whether it's something that we say or do, will trigger the other person's attachment fear. The person will experience the primary emotion, but usually react with the secondary emotion, as well as the behavior. The behavior also triggers the other partner's attachment fear, with the primary emotion being experienced, and then it's expressed in a secondary emotion. So this cycle goes on and on like that. And we see it all the time as we listen to couples share their stories. Instead of listening to the actual content of their fight, we pay attention to the attachment wording, the attachment language, the attachment fears and needs that they are talking about, so that we can help them see the cycle and then put it in front of them so that they can see this is what's happening in their relationship. So this is something very important to understand. So when people actually see the cycle going on and see they actually get stuck on this and they're experiencing emotions that they're not even aware of, that's when we can help people to talk to each other in a way that they never talked to each other before. So in therapy, in an EFT therapy, we go down the dotted line. We go down to the primary emotions. We go down to the attachment, fears, and longings, and help people to share that. So when they can do that, then they start to experience something different. They start to experience their partner not being so afraid. They start to experience their partner being not so scary. But in fact, they see something different because they're always used to seeing their partner being very angry, always getting upset about them. But once they see this pattern going on and they understand what's happening, now they have a map to go back to where they hope to be in the beginning, which is their safe haven. So, a time for reflection. For you, when you feel disconnected, what is your default option? What is your main move? How have you learned this in past love relationships? And how do you pull your partner into the spiral and maybe trigger primal panic in him or her? So take a moment to think about that. What's your move when you are disconnected? Which demon dialogue do you tend to fall in? Okay, the next thing that I want to talk about is called raw spots. When we are in when we are stuck in emotional disconnection and we're stuck in demon dialogue, usually our raw spots are hit. And we all have raw spots. And there are sensitivities from our temperament, our attachment histories, traumas in the past, and even our present relationships. We know that vulnerability comes with love. It's a given. The choice is how we deal with this. In a secure bond, partners can share and soothe each other's sore places. They can soothe each other's raw spots. And when they can do that, trust deepens. For more insecure partners, what happens is they either turn up their emotion or turn it off. And in doing so, they hit the other's raw spot and they enter into the demon dialogue. When the raw spots are hit, they trigger our alarm in our brain. We feel a sense of helplessness, especially feeling deprived and deserted. I mentioned that emotion is very fast. It happens in nanoseconds. And when that happens, our signals get scrambled and confused. We send very mixed messages, confusing messages to our partners. The unfortunate thing is we tend to hide our raw spots because we feel that if we let our partners see our raw spots, they're going to hurt us even more. They're going to be using that as a weapon against us. However, if you really want your relationship to get better, we need to take the courage to really show ourselves, our vulnerabilities. So we always tell clients, we validate that how courageous they are when they're able to share their hurts with others, when they're able to show others how scared they are, how sad they are. So what happens when a raw spot is hit? There's a radical shift in emotional tone or reality. The response may seem way out of proportion, even to yourself. You may be surprised in what you do when your raw spot is hit. You're off balance. Because why? Because when that happens, you're going into instant survival mode. And usually we step into our spiral, our demon dialogues. And often we don't have a map. We're out of control. And those feelings can be very scary. What is our goal when the raw spot is hit? We try to make sense of the raw spots. We pinpoint our attachment vulnerabilities, the deeper attachment needs and fears that triggered our demon dialogues. We talk about them. We try to figure out what is it that's causing such a huge reaction. And when we can do that, we can repair our rifts. We have to rise above the negative cycle to see that. And we have to reframe that the cycle as the enemy, not the partner. So what are the key steps to revisit a rocky moment? So we have to step out, see the spiral, see the negative pattern, see the demon dialogue, call it and stop it. Sometimes couples tell us the name of their demon dialogue. Some people may call it like a tornado, or maybe they call it something else. So when you have a name for your demon dialogue, when that happens, you can call it out, and you can stop it. So this is something that you can do. Both parties have to claim your moves. We have to claim our softer raw spot emotions. And we have to own how we shape our partner's feelings. So I turn away and you get scared. So this is something that we help partners to articulate, such as, I get scared when you turn away. I'm confused when you walked away. I'm confused and I get scared when you hide in your room, hide in front of the computer, and you don't talk to me for days. So this is how we help partners talk about their feelings and talk about their raw spot emotions. And then we supportively share your emotions with the other partner so that you can find an exit and comfort and soothe each other, and to recreate a secure base. So before we get into the Aree conversation, which is the last part of our talk, I want to give you my own personal example of how I end up hitting my wife's raw spot some time ago. So the reason why I'm sharing this with you is so that you can understand that it can happen to me, it happens to anybody. So as you know, during this time of the pandemic, we cannot find masks. So about a month ago, I decided to make my own cloth mask by going on YouTube and try to find out how to do that. So I don't have a sewing machine, so I sew it by hand. So this is what it looks like. So this is what I made. So I took a couple of hours doing that in the afternoon. And then my wife came home from work. She works in a hospital. So I told her that what I did, and I was very happy and I wanted to show her. But because normally when she comes home from work, because she works at the hospital, she has to take a shower first. So she showered. So after the shower, she came out. I was still cooking dinner. And she was just having some snacks. She was eating some chips. And so she was eating the chips, and then she was asking me, "Where's the mask?" And then I said, "Your hand's dirty." And then she said, "I just showered." But I said, "Your left hand just touched the chip. You just ate some chips. Your hand's dirty." But she said, "My right hand is clean." And then before anything continues, she flipped into anger and she told me, "I don't even want to know about your mask." And she walked away. So in that moment, definitely I hit a raw spot. I didn't even know that. And I stood there in silence. I don't know what to do or what to say. All of a sudden, I was shocked as to what did I do wrong to cause that. So I finished cooking, and obviously we had dinner together in silence. So during dinner time, I asked her, what was it that caused such huge reaction just a while ago? And then she told me that she felt like she was being treated like a 3-year-old. She was very excited to look at the math that I did, but I poured cold water on her. So I spoiled the fun. I spoiled everything. I screwed up. So now I recognize, what did I do wrong? So I apologize for unintentionally treating her like a 3-year-old, hurting her feeling, for unintentionally spoiling the fun of her looking at what I just did. So that's all we talked about during dinner, and then afterwards we talked more. So then I went and looked for my GPS, and I tried to figure out my way back to my secure base from which I got lost, right? So as we talked after dinner, she was saying something that was not related to actually what just happened before dinner. She was mentioning something in the past that, something that we had talked about. It's when when she has some suggestions about perhaps where to go for our dinner and stuff like that, I didn't always take all her suggestions. Sometimes I say, nah, or maybe we try something else. And sometimes I tend to do things my own way. So as we talk more about that, so we try to identify what are the attachment issues that are at stake. So we agree that this was something to do with trust and respect. So if I try to map out my cycle, when I demanded her to wash her hands before she touched my new mask, I triggered her attachment fear of she's not being respected. I didn't trust her, and she felt ignored, and she's not being accepted. So when that happens, I end up being silent. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. So that was our demon dialogue in that moment. So fortunately, we're not stuck in it for too long, and then we're able to step out of it and to look at it and stop it. So the reason why I'm telling you this is that, first of all, I'm not immune to this, even though I'm sharing this topic with all of you. I'm human. When either one of us raw spots gets hit, we all react in that manner. And sometimes our raw spots get hit very quickly and sometimes unintentionally. As I mentioned before, the emotion in that moment, there's definitely an emotional disconnection. It is stressful, it is uncomfortable. And the emotional response, especially the secondary emotion, is fast. It happens right away, right? She flipped into anger right away. And I flip into silence right away. And we get into our cycle briefly. But fortunately, I was able to find my GPS and find my way back to a secure base and to find my way back to my safe haven. So what I'm talking about is that we're able to go back and revisit that rocky moment that we had, and be able to talk about the things that I just shared with you, so that we understand a little bit better what is it that we're talking about. It's not about the math. It's not about that. It's actually something much more deeper. It's about trust. It's about respect. And when that is being threatened, when that raw spot is being hit, we go into a panic mode. So I hope my experience can help you think about your own rocky moment that you've had with your partner, and maybe help you to see the spiral that you get stuck in, and then you can do the same thing to be able to come out of it and to find the map that I talked about, the map of love that we know for sure it works to help us go back to where we started, our secure base. So lastly, I want to talk about Aree Conversations. So this is the kind of conversations that Sue Johnson also used the term homey type conversations. So these conversations are based on the previous conversation that I talked about in terms of talking about your cycle, talking about the rocky moments that you've had, and be able to share about them. And when you can do that, it is a positive cycle that creates safety and connection. The benefits of the Aree conversation is that we can recover from distress, we grow our trust, we can create a safe haven and a secure base. It can turn out our cuddle hormone, oxytocin. We can access our skills and stay flexible, be assertive and confiding in each other, can empathize and give care. Within ourselves, we grow, we learn, we can take risk to reach for our partner. With the other person, we can resonate much better with each other, and we can solve problems. Now the problems are just problems. They're not barriers to our emotional disconnection. So how do we do that? First of all, we have to tune into our fears. We have to share our fears, and your partner can help you with that, and you can stay positively engaged. So the question you ask yourself, or you share with the partner, is that what am I most afraid of? What are the fears that leap out in moments of disconnection and pull me into this demon dialogue? So this is about attachment fears. Second is that we can tune in and share our deeper needs, our attachment needs. Do it in a way that helps your partner to respond. What do I need from you? How can you help me to feel a secure connection? And when we can have these ARE conversations, it creates a positive bonding spiral, safe, strong partners, and safe, strong bonds. So I've covered a lot of material. I want to share with you that I've compiled a list of relationship resources, which is, again, your handout. So I've compiled a bunch of YouTube videos that talked about the new science of love, attachment theory. A lot of them, actually, Sue Johnson herself, she is in it. So I invite you to take a look at that. And what I've been talking about tonight comes from her books called Hold Me Tight, 7 Conversations for a Lifetime of Love. Love Sense is a book that talks about the revolutionary science of romantic love relationships. And the third one is another version of Hold Me Tight book, but it is a book written especially for Christian couples. So something I want to mention is that if you're interested to explore more about what I talked about tonight, to have a more in-depth discussion with your partner about these conversations, the Life Clinic is planning to have Hold Me Tight workshops later on. We don't know when, until we know that we can have physical gatherings again. But basically, it is an educational program, a 2-day workshop to talk about love and attachment, making sense of your and your partner's emotions and needs, understand how love goes wrong, identifying stuck points, how to talk about hurts without getting stuck, how to apologize and forgive, and discover ways to keep your love alive in your relationship. So there's a handout to give you more information about that. So I actually went over a bit over time. So are there any questions? So I'm going to close my slides.
Great stuff, James. I just want to tune in here so I can tell you about the chat and some questions. Before I do, though, James, you know, I'm a huge fan of Sue Johnson. Emotionally focused therapy, guys, if you want big changes quickly, it's a great way to go. And I happen to have both of what you mentioned because I'm a big fan. So definitely pick these up. These are amazing. You can just find them online. I had a lot of comments saying that they were very thankful for you sharing your personal experience. That was great. So it's very helpful. And if you guys want to join and show interest about the 2-day workshop, I've seen marriages transform in a weekend with the Hold Me Tight workshops, literally going from divorce to the most loving relationship in a weekend. I've seen, you know, some people call that a miracle. It's just, you know, the science at the end of the day when you know it. So I'm going to tell you, so first of all, a lot of thanks for the personal sharing. Please put in the chat or email us if you want to book a session with James. He's just wonderful with couples, but also he will be very involved with the 2-day workshop. And hopefully when we can all get together, we can transform some lives, James. So we have... So if you can make a note, James, as I read this, so that I can give you all the questions, and then I'll come off the screen and you could take over. So in the present context of COVID-19, there are no boundaries between work and home, as everyone is working from home. How does attachment get affected in such circumstances? Is the first question. How does a person deal with the situation when there is no disconnection between home and work environment? There is no difference in physical setting, and it creates an impact on the relationship. Great question. The other one, a lot of people liked your cycle diagram as well. That really put things into perspective. And it's very helpful in therapy for us therapists because you can really see a visual representation when you break it down for the clients. So you can study this yourself to see what your triggers are. What is the influence of culture and socialization processed on our attachment styles? Okay. Does attachment get affected by only the early experiences, or does attachment styles change with time?
Okay, so Ali, what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to answer some of them in the first, so that because I may not be able to remember all of them, so even though I wrote them down, is that okay?
The last one is just, what is the influence of cultural practices on attachment?
Okay.
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 I got everything. Otherwise, no, I think I'm good. And people were happy to also see that therapists also have these type of fights. Okay, I'll come off and give you the floor.
Okay, thank you.
And then you can finish.
Okay, thank you so much for your attendance and your questions. So the first question is related to, due to COVID-19, people have to stay home and work. How does attachment get affected? So I believe that all of us have our own individual attachment style, whether it's before COVID-19 or during COVID-19, but especially during COVID-19, our attachment gets easily triggered, because especially when it depends on the safety of your secure bond with the partner. If there's already some conflict to begin with, if there are already some issues that you have not been able to address, then for sure it can make things worse. So you may find that you become more sensitive to your partner's comments or presence, because you're facing each other all day. So the attachment really is the bond that you have with the other person. It is something that is supposed to help you get close. But in times of stress, especially during COVID-19, it can sometimes do the opposite. It can push the other person away unintentionally. So I think it is important for the partners to recognize what is it that you are experiencing during the COVID-19 when you are working from home, when there's no separation between work and home. How is it affecting your emotions? How are your attachment needs being triggered? So again, I would suggest that you identify, especially during COVID-19, what has been hard on you in terms of your attachment need, and what is your attachment fear. So there's two sides of the same coin, and be able to share with your partner honestly in a supportive manner. So that the key to that is that if we are able to slow it down and listen to each other, not necessarily we have to figure out a perfect solution. But the key that I find is that most partners will find it comforting to know that my partner is there for me. Because going back to the ARE, it's when you are in a situation when you experiencing increased stress, you can ask these basic questions. Is my partner there for me? Am I there for the partner? Am I responsive? And am I engaged? So I would suggest that you pay attention to those attachment cues that you have, recognize them, tune into your feelings with yourself, and then be able to share with the partner. So the second question, I'll pick up the last question about culture on attachment style. Usually the attachment styles, you develop that as a child over time. And whether it changes as an adult or not depends on a lot of factors. In general, unless you have done a lot of work on yourself, you notice that you have this kind of personality that you are have an issue with, or you notice that you have a lot of things in your life that you are not happy, and you have been trying something to do. You're trying to do something to work on that. It may, if you have been doing a lot of soul searching and a lot of work, a lot of inside work to look at, do a lot. If you have a lot of self-awareness, then perhaps you may have shifted your style a little bit. But I would say in general, most attachment styles stick with the person from childhood to adulthood, unless you've really done some work in examining your own life, to really do some soul searching, to really examine what is happening in your life. Otherwise, I would say it remains fairly stable. And it's not that it's either good or bad. It's just that you have to recognize what that style is doing in your relationship. Is it helping you in your relationship, or is it not? And if it is not, why not? What is hindering the relationship in the way you understand attachment? Culture. I have to say that usually culture may, when I talked about the attachment fears and the attachment needs, usually it goes across culture. We all have to meet those basic needs of attachment needs and fears that I mentioned earlier. However, I think culture has something to do with how we deal with those attachment needs and fears. For example, in some cultures, we believe that men should not cry, or men should not expose or share their vulnerable feelings. Especially sometimes it happens in our Asian culture as well. So even though we all have those attachment needs and fears, but the way we handle the emotions is different. The way we look at our attachment needs and fears will be different. So that's the only difference that I can think of in terms of culture. Ali, did I answer all the questions, or did I miss some of them?
You're good. I want to thank everyone for coming on. And James, thank you. You always impress me. And I appreciate all the knowledge you bring. And I'm very happy to have you with the Life Clinic and many more years to come, and us to continue transforming lives together. Everyone is saying thank you for answering the questions. We're good. And I'll let you take us out. Again, email us if you'd like to book anything, and definitely let us know if you want to join. We got thank you. Good job, James. More good jobs. A lot of thumbs up.
So again, thank you all for joining. And it's a pleasure for me to share this with everybody. So have a good night.